awesome.
Yeah, it's fun for sure. Well, man, I want to really dig into the layers of your life. Very interesting. And to begin with, we're getting on the 4-year anniversary of this whole pandemic thing. How did you survive COVID and how did it change you?
You know, it's interesting because I do voiceovers for a living. The pandemic was a boon to me. One, I had started this a couple years before the pandemic, so I was already isolating. I was spending all my days in the booth anyway and wasn't going anywhere, so that wasn't a problem. And two, everyone all of a sudden needed voiceover artists to do all the things that, especially corporate, needed to be done: e-learning, web videos, that kind of thing. So from that standpoint, and plus the fact audiobooks have been growing double-digit growth every year for the past 10 years. So outside of all the other tragedy going on outside, personally, it really had almost no impact to me at all.
So, I know there's a lot of things that go into what you are now and what you've done, but if we were to boil down everything in front of a bunch of third graders at career day and one of the kids said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that kid?
I sit in a closet and read to myself all day is what I do. And it's really not much more than that. I mean, it's I tell them, it's like someone gives me a book and then I have to read it out loud so they can record it. And then they sell that recording to people who want to listen to it rather than read it. And I'm the person that sits in a room and reads the book out loud.
So let me ask you this. What is your best way of divulging into a book? Do you listen to it? Are you a listener or are you a reader?
Both.
Okay. So you can do
Um,
both.
I can do both. I mean, I love audiobooks, and at a time when I was working in corporate and was commuting 1 hour each way every day, I would be zipping through audiobooks just in my commute left and right. Now I'm not in the car that much, so it takes a little longer to get through an audiobook, but I still listen to them.
Yeah.
And you can't see it, but I have piles and piles and piles of books over here that my wife is going to throw out if I don't do something with them quickly. Um, so I love reading. Have always loved reading. I've written 2 books, as this is why we're talking, and it's just that whole world just fascinates me, and I enjoy it so much that it's kind of like a no-brainer.
As a writer, what was the first book when you were a kid that you read that really opened the curtain?
You know, I always remember reading in like elementary school, and there was a, I'm going to regret saying this. There was a series of books when I was in third and fourth grade, and the protagonist's name was Danny Dunn. And it was Danny Dunn and the Flying Saucer. It was, juvenile books. And I can remember just wanting to read book after book after book of that. But the one book that really caught me and just started this path of going down and devouring books was The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I remember reading it in 7th grade and just going, "Holy crap!" And you just like, okay, this is where I'm going. And then I devoured everything Ray Bradbury ever wrote, and I just kept reading and reading and reading. Part of that comes from when I was growing up in the 60s. We had no air conditioning. So in the summertime, it would get really hot. And the one place that did have air conditioning was the public library. So my mom would take me and my sister, and we'd go sit in the public library for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon during the summer. And so I was surrounded with books all the time, and became a voracious reader. I'm sure that had something to do with it.
So who's been a hero for you, an inspiration in your life?
That's a tough question, only because there are so many.
Yeah.
Um, And it's one of the questions I ask on my podcast, and people always look at me like, "Really? Are you kidding me? You want me to name someone?" Um, who's been an inspiration for you? If I had to pick just one, oh yeah, I'll go with it. Joe Pepitone.
Okay. Okay.
The first baseman for the Yankees, because I was a Yankees fan growing up, and I don't know why. I mean, the team was, the last days of like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Bobby Richardson and Elston Howard and all the greats. But for some reason, because Joe Pepitone was such a rebel badass, it just never fit in with the mold. I just gravitated to him. And in fact, because I played baseball growing up, and I don't know how my dad found this, because Joe Pepitone was a left-hander, but he found a right-handed first baseman's mitt, which is the position I played, that was autographed by Joe Pepitone. So that was like my treasure growing up. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, it would be there. If you want to talk strictly literary world, um, God, there's so many. Of course, Bradbury would have to probably be at the top of my list because
Yeah.
I loved everything he read, and I did get a chance to meet him before he passed away at a writers' conference, which was just like I was starstruck. I'm sure I
Yeah.
said something stupid, but it's just he. I would to this day have to say that he's the one, and there have been so many authors since then that I've gobbled up everything that they've ever written because they just write so well. So
So, speaking of meeting Ray and being a podcaster, what would be a dream interview of someone that's walking the earth right now? Who would you love to get on the show and really talk to?
this is going to sound really weird, but the one person that, and I have been trying to get her on the show, which I know it's going to an impossibility, but I'd really love to talk to her, is Valerie Bertinelli.
Wow, yeah,
I
that would
would,
be
I would,
interesting.
I would love to talk to her for a number of reasons. One, in the show she was in as a kid, One Day at a Time, her character's name was Barbara Cooper. Well, that's my mother's name, so I'm sure there's an Oedipal thing going on here to
Yeah.
start with. Second of all, with all the cooking she's doing, and I used to have my own baking business, and I love to cook and that kind of thing, and all the trauma and grief that she's gone through her life, and apparently it's been quite a bit. Um, I'd just like to talk to her about
Yeah.
it, and just have that be the focus. And I don't want to focus on like Hollywood or anything like that. I want to focus on her and what her life's been like. And she's very free about posting stuff on like Instagram and Facebook, and she does all the time. But I haven't been able to break past her public relations person
Yeah.
because I don't have that many followers, so I'm sure they have invites from all over the place that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of followers.
Yeah.
So in that area, I've got nothing to offer. But yeah, no, I would love to sit and talk with her for a while.
That would be fascinating. I find it interesting how she was always amicable with Eddie. Wolfgang seems like he's been very well loved. Just that in itself to me, I've always been intrigued by her and how that happened.
And the one thing about Eddie, even though he had his issues, certainly with everything that he went through, there was nobody that looked like they were having so much fun
Oh
being a
man.
rock and roller than Eddie Van Halen. It didn't matter what he was doing; he was having a blast
Yeah.
doing it,
Uh-huh.
and he was willing to share that with people. And that, in and of itself, aside from being just like a master guitar player, was just so attractive. And I'd love to watch them.
Have you read Running with the Devil? The manager wrote a book on the band.
No,
Check it out. Monk, I think,
okay.
was his name. It's fascinating, and it goes through the history. And he was the manager from the beginning, and he talks a
Right?
lot about how Eddie kind of was the guy that really did embody the spirit of kind of being starstruck, yet soaked it all up. And Valerie's in there when they got married, and how she dealt with all of it. Yeah, you would dig it
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I would. I would definitely. What was it called? Running with the Devil.
Running with the Devil. And the manager, I think his last name was Monk, but yeah, once you do a search, you'll find it
Yeah.
pretty quick. Yeah. So let me ask you this. You've had an interesting career trajectory. How did all of this begin? Take me back to where you were born and raised and how you evolved, like a Twitter timeline of where we're at.
God. As I tell people, my career is like a shoots and ladders game on crack. I mean, it's all over the place. Grew up in Westfield, New Jersey. classic suburban thing. I got really lucky because our neighborhood was not a traffic point, and there were 15 other kids my age in the neighborhood, and it was from that aspect, it was just an ideal place to grow up. Coming out of, got very into drama in high school. Drama club, drama society. Those were my people. Those were the people I gravitated to, much to my father's chagrin. But those were the people I gravitated to. Coming out of college was radio, and I got lucky in that I got in with a group of people that pretty much we took over the radio station, and it was a radio station that was a very powerful FM station. It was 5,600 watt, which for a college in the middle of Pennsylvania, nowhere, was a very powerful FM station. And so I got very lucky with the timing that me and some of my friends were just like, we're running this thing. And it was really fun. And it's like, this is what I want to do. Came out of college, got into radio, bumped around a bunch of different stations in Pennsylvania and Houston, Texas, and New Jersey and that kind of thing. And came to the realization once I got married and started raising a family that you can't work in radio and eat with a family at the same time. So it's like, okay, I got to do something else to bring in money. And from that standpoint, I worked for a while at a photo studio in central Pennsylvania, which also didn't pay any money, just because that's the nature of the business. Ended up working in real estate in New Jersey, in commercial real estate, arranging loans for people. We built houses during the real estate boom of the 80s, built about 15, 16 houses throughout the state. Left there when the bubble burst in the late 80s and the real estate market crashed, and got into computers, which everyone was doing in 1990, or it was before that, it was 83, was it? No, it was 90. 83 is when I came over and did that. See, I'm getting old. My memory's getting
No,
cloudy.
I understand. I'm in the same place.
Got into computers in 1990, went to work for EDS, which is Electronic Data Systems, which was Perot's old company, but I got in after he had sold it to GM. Got a lot of training in that and was in that for 25 years, 30 years in corporate. And just at the tail end of all that, 2014, my wife was diagnosed with brain cancer, which is where this book comes from. And I'm grateful to this day that somehow I had weaseled my way in and actually became an employee of a huge one of the biggest telecom companies at the time, who had just a Rolls-Royce version of a healthcare plan. So, how it all aligned, I don't know. It's not up to me, but it definitely aligned. And it was, which I'm grateful for to this day. So we went through that, got to be about 2016, and I was like, I can't take this corporate stuff anymore. So for a whole host of reasons, I walked out, literally. Just walked into HR, here's my computer, here's my badge, here's my phone, see ya.
Yeah.
A completely classless move, but I was having a nervous breakdown at the time. So it's just like, it took me about a year to get acclimated again to life. And I got a email one day out of the blue about this voiceover seminar that was happening. And, it was free, you can come on and blah, 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 blah. Ended up doing that because I always wanted to get back behind the mic again. I still loved radio. In the late 80s, I hooked into a radio station in Central Jersey and convinced them that the one thing they needed that they didn't have was movie reviews. So they said, oh, okay. And they actually sold it, which amazed me. And I did movie reviews for a radio station for 5 years. They paid me to go to the movies. It was very cool. It was very cool.
Good job.
So yeah, I burnt myself out on it, but it was very cool, and I'm thankful to them. So I always wanted to get back behind the mic, and the guy that was running the webinar in 2017, I guess it was, I contacted him afterwards, and I said, here's my background. What do you think? And he said, well, let's get together, and I want to give you some things to do, and I'll see if I can work with you. And we went through that, and he said, yeah, let's do this. So worked with him for a while, put a demo together, worked with a bunch of other different coaches in the industry, and it's kind of snowballed and snowballed. And just to market myself, I hooked up with a marketing coach, and what can I do to market myself? And we thought about doing like a video podcast. And I said, well, I don't want to do the same thing everyone else does. Well, let's do something a little bit different. And I thought of Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton. I don't know if you ever saw that,
Yeah.
but at the end he had those 10 questions that he'd ask everyone. It's like, let's just do that. Let's do something 15, 20 minutes. I'll ask them these goofy questions, and that'll be it. It's just to have some fun and get my name out there. That was 3 years ago, and it's still going and growing. And, it's now just expanding into, anything in the creative industry. I'm focusing on creative artists for the podcast. So it's like, it's taken on a life of its own, which
Yeah.
is wonderful. I mean, is it paying me anything? No. No. I mean, a
Right.
podcast, unless you're monetizing it, it's not doing anything for you other than taking a whole lot of work to put it together. So it's, and maybe that'll happen. Maybe it won't. I'm having too much fun with it, just talking to people like you and having fun. And in the middle of all that going on, as I mentioned, my wife was diagnosed with brain cancer, and that was about a year treatment, and she's 9 years clear now. So we are very grateful
Yeah.
that, but doing that, getting into the caregiver role, which I knew nothing about, and it was trial by fire, and caregivers were just starting to get some attention that, their stresses were just as hard as the patient's stresses. And so I learned a lot doing it. And I thought, I want to give back because our experience with the cancer was so positive. And I know we are one of the lucky ones because we hit the right doctors at the right time in the right hospital and the right nurses, and everything just fell into place. So I was like, I want to give back. And the hospital, which was Sloan Kettering, was just starting a caregiver to caregiver support program. They had a patient to patient where former patients could talk to current ones and, just listen to them and hear what they're going through and that kind of thing. They started that up for caregivers, which I immediately jumped on. And as I went through that and started to realize more and more that the caregivers were all kind of experiencing the same things, I thought, well, let me take everything that I've learned, and I'd been journaling through this whole journey, doing social media posts. One, to keep my sanity, just doing some writing, and two, it saved me from making 5,000 phone calls a day to family, friends, and that kind of thing, because they could just go here and read. And all that information was just kind of sitting there, and I was like, well, let me see if I can put together something that A, would be helpful to other caregivers, and B, be something that people would actually want to read and use. So that was kind of the focus.
Yeah.
So that's my life.
Yeah, I love it. So let me ask you this, of all of these things that you've done and evolved into and overcome and achieved, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, my kids and my grandkids.
Yeah.
Um, I've got a son who's 42, lives in Philadelphia. He's a massage therapist. My daughter is 40, has 3 daughters, 2 twins that are turning into their mid-teens. So that's just one picnic after another.
Yeah.
And then she has another daughter that's, just in kindergarten this year. So, it's that. I look at them, and there's times when I want to shoot myself in the head when I look at them and say, what are you doing? But overall, how can I not be proud of everything that they're doing and have done and accomplished in their lives?
So coming from the world of radio, who was your favorite person? Did you have a favorite radio personality? Who's that been for you? An inspiration? Or just someone you
Growing
love
up,
listening to?
growing up, it was kind of a tradition in our family that once you turned 13 years old, you got a transistor radio.
Yeah.
Now this is 1960, whatever. So it's just, you got the little handheld transistor radio. Growing up in New Jersey, you didn't listen to anything except either WABC or WMCA.
Yeah.
AM. That's all you listen to. And I was an ABC fan, and I loved Dan Ingram in the afternoon from 2 to 6. I mean, there was just something about him. I just loved listening to him. Cousin Brucey, I could take in little bits here and there, but after a while, I was like, no, I've had enough of that. But Dan Ingram was one. Murray the K, who was a real rebel, who was on WMCA, was another one. When I got older, I started listening to NEWFM, and it was Allison Steele, it was Pete Fornatale, it was Scott Muni, it was that whole crew of the 70s
Yeah.
when FM was really starting to they finally realized they could make a whole lot of money at it, and it started creatively and then kind of slowly went commercial. But yeah, I would turn on NEWFM and just listen to whoever was on and just soak all that in. Plus the fact they were playing music that I was really connected with at the time, so
Yeah.
that also helped. So today, I don't listen to radio that much anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I listened to Imus a lot, in the 80s and 90s before he, retired and passed away. I listened to the early Howard Stern when he was on NBC. When he moved over to FM, the luster kind of fell off a little bit for me with that. But
Yeah.
but while he was at NBC, I know it was absolutely traumatic and for him at that place, and all his anger came out. But it made for interesting radio.
Yeah.
Um, and that would be about it at this stage.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, as a Yankees fan, baseball fan, if you could go back in time and see one game with your own eyes, where are you going?
Hmm. I would go to see, and this is going to sound weird, but I think I would go back to, no, that's a toss up. I think I'd go back to where Lou Gehrig retired
Yeah.
when he made his famous speech. Either that or the Bobby Thompson home run
Yeah.
in the 50s, that when the Giants came all the way back from 13 games down and won it. Either one of those I'd love to be a spectator there. I got lucky. I've been to like one pro baseball game in the past 4 or 5 years, and it was at Citi Field, New York. It was the Mets, and I forget his name, but it was the game where the rookie on the Mets beat Aaron Judge's rookie home run record.
Oh, Alonso?
Pete
Yeah, Pete
Alonso,
Alonso.
and we were there at that game
That's
when
cool.
and the place went berserk when he
Yeah.
hit it. That was so cool
That
to be.
would be cool.
So I figure like I've been graced with that, so I don't really need to go back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you did pretty good. Yeah.
Really.
So so there's all these different incarnations of you throughout your life, but I'm curious, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, all of the people that you've worked for, everyone that listens to your audio, reads your books, gets involved with your podcast, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Do we have time for this? I mean,
We're running low on time.
this could take a few days here. Um, you know, without getting into a lot of what my life has been, when I at the end of the day, I am I like being the person that people can trust. I like being the person who is there for my friends, for my family. I like being the empathetic ear. So I guess the caregiver role is kind of natural for me,
Yeah.
in that aspect. I want to be the guy that people come to for a laugh. One of my basic, you fill out these things in voiceover and say, well, what language do you speak? English, but they never have a box that says sarcasm, and I
Yeah.
always want to check that one off because you can talk to any one of my friends, and the first word they'd probably come up with is sarcasm. So, uh, but I like making people laugh, and honestly, I'm not going to do stand up and get up and tell jokes because that scares the crap out of me. But it just I want to be that person that people can leave the rest of the world behind.
So if anyone wants to pick up the latest book, listen to your podcast, Twisted Ties, which was in 14, anything revolving around your world, where do they go?
Uh, Depends on which part of my world they really want to be
Right.
exposed to.
That's the question.
you know, um, if it's on the book side, you should go out to Amazon because that's where everything's listed. Twisted Ties is there, the first book, and the recent book, the Not So Little Book of Cancer Caregiving, is out there as well. There isn't an audio book on it yet. I know it's coming. I've been slacking off on it, but they could go there. If they want to know about voiceover, it's jimcoopervo.com. And, there's all sorts of links there that'll take them to the podcast or, my demos or everything that's there. I'm all over social media. Not that I want to be, but I kind of have to be because
Yeah.
that's to make the business work. So
Yeah.
whether it's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, Facebook and LinkedIn is Jim Cooper VO. And because Instagram gave me a whole bunch of crap when I first signed onto it, the tag there is your VO Big Dog, which is my handle.
Okay. Right on. Jim, this has been great. Thank you so much for your story.
Oh,
I love it.
yeah, it's wonderful. How